the Japan strategist at CLSA Asia-Pacific Markets, Nicholas Smith. Nick, great to have you on the program. Some people say that the Olympus scandal is evidence of a wider problem with corporate governance in Japan. You disagree. Why?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Olympus is interesting because it shows that they actually do have malfeasance in Japan, same as everywhere else. But what it doesn't show is that there are a load of unexploded bombs. Think about the numbers here. The vast majority of corporate scandals, of accounting scandals that you know of, have been in really in the US, and then after that in European countries. And Japan has been interesting for having relatively few of them. And if you think about why that might be the case, you say, well, actually, CEOs in the US are hugely incentivized. They get paid 343 times as much as the troops that work under them. And 80% of that is incentive bonus. So they are incentivized for daredevil driving. Whereas Japan, the CEO gets paid about 16 times what his troops get paid, and there's almost no incentive in that. So he's incentivized for driving Miss Daisy, for being very careful with the company and just being really sure not to mess things up. So
Nick,
we have had a case of things going wrong, but that's unusual.
I take your point. However, there are cultural characteristics and things that are unique to Japan that people have been pointing out. Perhaps whistleblowers not coming forward because of cultural reasons.
Look, almost invariably, when people talk about a cultural reason, they're using it as a fig leaf for intellectual laziness. The Japanese are, in most regards, particularly from an economic sense, like everyone else. They want $1 rather than no dollars, a lot of dollars rather than a few dollars. Now, the difference on whistleblowers is the incentivization that happens in other markets for whistleblowers to come out. So there was a case in the US, I think it was with Pfizer, where 4 employees were actually given $78 million as the prize for coming forward and talking about this.
Right.
Whereas in Japan, whistleblower protection laws are actually still quite weak. So, and Olympus was actually quite a good example of that. Someone blew the whistle on them, and then he spent several years now fighting Olympus after his job was wrecked.
Help us work out, Nick, how do you spot the next Olympus? What are the red flags that indicate perhaps that something's not quite right, not totally above board at a company, whether it be in Japan or elsewhere?
Well, I mean, in this particular case, I think the most important red flags were related to auditors. So when a company changes its auditor, that's very often a red flag. When a company is using a small auditor, very often that's a red flag. It doesn't have to be, but in this case, the change of the auditor should have been a red flag. In Japan, one of the problems that we do have is that the punishment for auditors cutting corners is very small, and they're really just paid for adding up numbers and not paid for
right.
digging deeper and looking for problems. So that is definitely something Japan needs to deal with.
All right. Well, let's talk about Japan as an investment prospect. Are you recommending people invest in Japan, and if so, in what kinds of Japanese assets?
Okay, well, I think the year ahead, particularly in first quarter, I think is going to be very bumpy indeed. So we're going to go through times when people think that Europe is dealt with. And I think what's happened in Europe is basically you're just putting a Band-Aid on a snake bite. That actually the poison is still in there, and the more you try to cover it up with the Band-Aid, the worse it's going to get. So it's very dull, but what I'm suggesting is Japan is a great investment location at the moment. So because of the rebuilding of Tohoku after the earthquake, it's going to have faster economic growth than most places. It's also got great operational gearing, and on top of that, it's got unbelievable valuations. But I'm still suggesting that in first quarter, at least, you stay with some of the domestic defensive places, regions that are producing lots of cash flow and lots of dividends. It's a little bit sleepy, but being able to get to sleep at night, I think, is going to be important in first quarter.
All right. Nicholas Smith, Japan strategist at CLSA Asia-Pacific Markets. Thank you so much for your insights this morning.